Welcome one and all to Dane's World. Very great episode today. As promised, we have Angel Castro on for part 2, the epic conclusion of our 2-part series. It is really great. I was just almost very concerned that I hit the wrong button, but I did not. All the buttons are right over here. All very good. Remember to come to Vince's this Saturday. Come to Vince's this Saturday, 29th. Come out and see the show, guys. Vince's Italian Ristorante. You know where it is. Harbor Boulevard, 8 p.m. You can get a ticket at the door, $3. That's what it is. I don't have a lot to offer this episode. I'll see if I can dig deep and provide some insight. See if I can get you guys up on my life. This episode with Angel was a lot of fun. Just recorded it. He just left. Great time. Always fun to learn stuff. Things on the personal front are pretty stagnant. We got the show. That'll be cool. So, professionally, that's a jam. In terms of, everything else, I don't know. Things are stagnant, not too exciting. Reflecting on the past and theorizing for the future. Not a lot of praxis right now, though. Not a lot of actually doing anything. I do not know if I don't know. I've been doing the going out to bars and chasing tail thing more often. That might be a good thing to do with the rest of my night. Because what else are you gonna do in this fucking life? Besides go out and chase some tail. There were a couple recent... Sorry for that dead air. There were a couple recent Fantano videos that were really funny. Anthony Fantano's his alternate channel. Go watch on the channel Fantano, the alternate channel to the Needle Drop. Anthony Fantano's channel. Watch Big Drama Donkey Dissed Me and LMFAO Sorry for Party Rocking Classic Review. The LMFAO one in particular was really hilarious. Those two sketches both actually got me harder than any more conventional comedy has gotten me at all recently. So watch those. Those are good. Listen to this podcast. You're already doing it. Enjoy this episode, everyone. Enjoy it. I just stuttered. I keep stuttering. Oh well, we have a stuttering president. We have rights. Listen to the episode. Enjoy.
I was thinking it might be a juicy conversation.
Yeah, welcome. This is a good one to start. So we're asking the question, and we're going to close the windows real quick here too. But we're asking the question, is are figures like Joe Biden and Barack Obama left-wing, I guess, is part of the question, and what are the key differences between the recent Democratic and Republican presidents? I'm thinking Democrats seem to have done at least their big moves are public spending, as opposed to, it seems like Republicans' big moves tends to be tax cuts. So you want to take from there?
Yeah, what I was going to mention is if we're talking about the most recent kind of presidential elections, yes, you're right. Both Trump and Bush, it seemed like a lot of what their campaign was revolved around was tax cuts. And it kind of seems like that's a standard that Ronald Reagan set back in the 1980s. I don't know if you're too familiar.
Government is not your friend. That philosophy.
Yes, that, and also trickle-down economics.
Which I love that Joe Biden denounced in the most recent State of the Union. I hope that he follows I hope that he walks the walk.
Yeah, so what I was going to say by mentioning him was that he's kind of set the standard to what a successful Republican candidacy and presidency was last seen as, right? Because you have the debacle with Nixon back in the 60s. LBJ also kind of, he did.
LBJ was a Democrat.
Oh, was he?
Right? Yeah. I'm pretty sure LBJ was a Democrat. Granted, not a very good Democrat. Who is a really good Democrat? I don't find a lot of them super exciting. But LBJ was a Democrat because he took over for Kennedy.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't remember if they were still doing the Republican and Democratic tickets anyway. Long story short, but if you really look at history, it's like, okay, there's Ronald Reagan, and then what other Republican president comes to mind? Right?
He's been the most recent popular one because when you look at like HW, well, one-term presidents are losers, right? George W. Bush, history is not remembering him fondly already. He has a low approval rating. If you look at it now, if you ask people now how they feel about George W. Bush, it's pretty abysmal.
Yeah. But did you also notice how, like, as soon as Trump got elected and then people were talking shit about Trump, he popped out of nowhere and started making appearences and stuff? Did you notice that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, all of a sudden, by comparison, he wasn't that bad.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember saying that to my mom. I was like, oh my God, remember when George Bush was the difficult president to deal with?
Yeah. Well, I imagine it's very prevalent for you. It's most of your childhood.
Yeah, I mean, my parents are like center left. I mean, my mom's like a liberal who likes Bernie, and my dad's like just like a standard, like, I don't know, boring liberal. I can't tell if he likes Bernie or not, but I don't know, they kind of raised me on like, fuck Bush. They had Daily Show and Colbert on a lot, and so that was, the beginning of my road down the
political.
Right, yeah. I don't know, and it is, so the obvious thing to say would be like that I was brainwashed or I'm just like left because my parents, right? But, I think that, political belief is super fucking intrinsic, right? And stuff that just stems from our values. So stuff of like, where do your values come from? I mean, it seems to be inherently inseparable from your parents. I mean, all of our ideological journeys start with our parents. That's like the first stuff that or like family.
Right.
Family in general is the first stuff that we get exposed to. And that was mostly the only family I was, hearing from. And then I guess, my extended family too. There were some opinions there, but yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. It's almost inevitable that your own values and political leanings reflect more or less what your family situation was. Yeah, to an extent. True. Obviously, there's outliers. There's people who completely go 180 on what they were, the values that they were raised reflected within a political party. But going back to the whole Reagan situation, yes. I think he was such a success within the Republican Party that I think back and I think of every other president just trying to emulate that in their candidacy and in their presidency, which is why you still get situations where it's like, it's become a staple that the Republicans want to lower taxes. Mm-hmm. When if you really consider like what it means to be a Republican in 2021, it's not only lowering taxes but also some sense of keeping government out of your home. All these values.
Less regulations.
Yeah, less regulation.
Well, keeping government out of your home in a sense, but not keeping government out of your home with regards to like marijuana legalization or like social rights in general. I don't know. They tend to be bad on like gay rights, trans rights. I mean, they do want control of your home in that regard.
Well, that's where the line gets blurred between what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be a conservative, right? Because
or a libertarian, you can kind of throw that in,
or even that too.
Flavor,
yeah, but it's one of those things where it's like a Venn diagram where they might have sections where they meet, but not necessarily overlap.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm
saying.
Yeah,
we have this super frustrating lack of democracy in the world in general. I mean, it's always tough, because it's like there's so many ways our democracy could be better, right? We could have ranked choice voting. We could abolish the Electoral College. We could not have a Senate that totally fucks urban areas and gives, and we could have the Senate, which is just gives this, I just believe as long as, I understand that the United States has always been a republic and not, but just I just believe that the vote of someone in LA is just as valuable as the vote of someone in Wyoming, but right now the system doesn't reflect that.
Are you touching on the concept of tyranny of the minority?
I mean, yeah, as long as we have a federal government, it might as well be a democratized one where it reflects the will of the people, right? I mean, it's weird that Trump was president and he never once even reached a 50% approval rating. Not once did even half the country approve of him, and he was president. I mean, that's not acceptable from like my values, you know.
Well,
Isn't
I mean,
that weird.
It's the Trump presidency or the Trump win during the election reflected the second time in my lifetime where the popular vote did not match the electoral college vote. Mm-hmm. You know, I still remember what it was like. I was 10 going on 11.
I was 1. Yeah,
you were pretty young to remember that. But people were pretty outraged as well when Bush won, just as bad as they were when Trump won. And it got to the point where it went to the Supreme Court, and of course the Supreme Court having the ultimate say on what ended up being valid as far as the way Florida conducted its count. I don't know if you know too much about that history. I can't remember the case.
Yeah, and family of Bush was involved. Edward,
his brother was a governor at the time, I believe. Which goes into question a little bit of like the ethical manner in which maybe they had conducted it, but
stole the election a little bit.
Well, you could argue that, but at the same time, it's like if we're really coming down to Florida making the decision, you know, has Florida ever proven itself to be really a swing state?
Yeah, it used to be. It isn't anymore.
Not since I've been cognizant of politics.
When was the last time Florida went blue? That would be a good, because
it's at least it would have to be Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
it would have to be at the earliest. At the earliest, and we're talking.
Obama never won Florida.
I don't believe he did. Did he?
All right, that would be an interesting thing to look up.
Maybe
I'll see.
I could be wrong. I'll defer to your knowledge, but the point that I was trying to make with TBD. Yeah. You know, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know too much about details. Like I said, like I told you last time, I don't follow the Joneses.
I'm the same.
But as far as I've always been aware of, Florida has always had a strong inclination for conservative values and Republican voting.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about Cuba, when when Cuba had its revolution and a lot of people were kicked out or left voluntarily because of the fact that the Castro regime nationalized a lot of the resources and land. The people who had money and power, emigrated to the United States. And that's why we actually had the whole, I forget what it was called in particular, but like once a Cuban lands on American soil, he becomes an automatic refugee. That was a policy that was implemented back then in order to,
drain Cuba, get people to come to the U.S.
Not so much that, but it's more like a slap in the face to Cuba.
No, well, yeah, it's an aggressive move to Cuba one way or
another. Yeah, it's an incentivized immigration. You know, can you imagine what it's like being an immigrant in any other part of the world being told all you gotta do is touch land and you're good to go?
Yeah,
it's very enticing.
Yeah,
but what ended up happening?
Seems attractive.
But what ended up happening is that a lot of people who weren't of the rich kind eventually wanted to escape as well, because regardless of how good Cuba's doing as a communist socialist experiment, life is way going to be better in the United States.
And it just is so infuriating that the United States was blockading Cuba that whole time, because of the Castro thing that you explained to me off air, which was interesting. But it's like, come on, just let Cuba be,
But they weren't, because there's interest. And what I was going to say is with this first wave of immigration from Cuba, you have a large portion of the population that was conservative in values. Actually, a lot of Latin American countries historically have very much high conservative values because of their religious intertwining and what's the apostolization when they, or that's a made-up word. Proselytize. You know what I'm talking about? When they come and teach their religion around?
Like a mission?
Yeah, indoctrination, sorry.
Okay, sure.
That makes more sense. So it's like the indoctrination of the religious culture within Latin America instilled hardcore religious conservative values within many Latinos throughout the, granted we're talking 60, 70 years ago, but it's a little bit less nowadays. But if you go back 2 generations, even Mexicans, a lot of them hold homophobic values, misogynistic values as far as like where the women's place is in the home compared to the men's. I could, personally, anecdotally, I could tell you that my grandpa didn't allow my mom to go study because he didn't feel like there was any point for a woman to have a degree if she was just going to go and have children. So what was the point as far as he thought? What was
I think we should hear him out. That's fair.
Well, he's dead. He's dead now. But the whole point is like you have all these conservative Latinos who come to Florida, and essentially many of them, not all of them, but many of them put down roots in Florida. So if you're looking outside of what the American population is, whether they're maybe swaying left or right, but you also have this large wave of definitely conservative, Republican-leaning values.
Oh yeah. In Florida, that's connected. So in Florida, that's straight up connected to Cuba, and there's a larger sort of like the religious affiliation of a lot of the Latino population influences that as well. But
sure.
Then how do you help me bridge that with the fact that Bernie Sanders won the California Latino and Hispanic population by such a huge amount in 2020. Like he built his win in California on that demographic, from what I understand.
Well, I mean, I have to point out the obvious that California is not Florida, right?
Mm-hmm. Opposite coasts.
And if you think about it, the majority population of Florida is of older age than the majority population of California, I would argue. So that just reinforces the point that an older generation still holds conservative values compared to a younger generation here in California.
And they're immigrating from a different country if you're in California.
Sure.
Probably.
And it's also different times. So it's like maybe the more recent immigrants don't hold these religious values as much as the older ones were. But if we're talking about a population that has a majority of an older group, then it's more likely than not that they're going to hold those conservative values. And if I'm not mistaken, Trump won Florida.
Totally. Yep,
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, this last time, 2020.
Yeah, it was polling like it was going to be close, and then it wasn't close at all.
Yeah.
Trump crushed Florida.
There was a lot of high hopes for Florida. I think Obama went to Florida to campaign for Biden.
Okay, so my phone should be back on now. Here, I'll see if I can get the electoral maps for Obama's years.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I was talking about when he went to campaign for Biden this last election, he helped him out going to Florida.
Right, yeah, high hopes.
But it's that's what I'm saying. Like, as far as Florida being a swing, I know it's always come down to maybe we can flip Florida, but I think it's only been recent that might be the case, because I know they've also trying to restore voting rights for people with felon criminal histories.
I would like that. I'm all about reformation.
I've never really understood how like an automatic felon just excludes you from being able to vote on things that still impact you. Mm-hmm. Especially once you've paid your debt to society and served your time and
in 2012 Obama won Florida.
Oh, he did win.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My mistake.
Yeah. Well,
did he win in 2008?
That's a good thought. Yeah. Because Florida was the way I heard it advertised in 2020 was that it was like supposed to be close, but then it just totally wasn't at all. I think Trump really speaks to that Miami coast. I wouldn't be surprised if he really speaks to
realtors, man.
Isn't it like
realtors?
Yeah, isn't it like a business-minded population? That particular. Talk to me about the difference in. I guess you already were, but the difference in flavor between.
Flavor.
Yeah.
One's spicy, one's mild.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The mild is in Florida, right? Because they're older.
The coast is a lot spicier from where they're.
Okay. Yeah.
Inland is a little bit milder.
Right, yeah, because Florida's that weird mix, right? Because it seems like it should be a swing state, because it's got young people in Miami and older people everywhere, old people of all varieties.
Have you ever been to Florida?
I don't want to go.
Dude, I drove through Florida one time. So many attorney billboards for old people. I'm not even joking. Like, have you ever been in an accident? You're of an older age, like that kind of billboard. It was hilarious. I was like, wow, they really cater to old people here. And I was driving through Fort Myers down to, or from Orlando down to Fort Myers, which is like Orlando obviously being a big metropolitan area. Mm-hmm. Fort Myers still being a large city, but not not significantly larger than or large in comparison to Orlando, but it was very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's low there, marshy, swampy.
It was nice though. Yeah, it's not that bad.
No, and Obama won it in 2008 too. Obama.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he has Florida on lock. Yeah.
I had no idea, man.
Yeah, and Joe Biden.
What happened, man? What happened?
Hillary and Joe.
One centrist Democrat wins it, and another centrist Democrat loses it.
Yeah, it's because Trump, man. They like Trump. It's because that's the thing about politics is most people aren't like thinking just in terms of ideology, or maybe not even at all for some people. It's such a personality contest. That's why I'm worried about, maybe this little moment that progressives had was because of more Bernie's ability to speak to certain demographics than our entire package. Not a lot. I don't hear a lot of people being excited about like the Bernie type of politician as a whole. Like it's Bernie. That's who people liked, Personality. Yeah, Bernie's personality. He's a Jew from Vermont Brooklyn originally, and then
I gotta love those Jews.
Yeah, I gotta love those Jews. Yeah, God bless.
Yeah. Well, I thought what appealed a lot about his personality was the fact that he's just been more or less very consistent with his stances.
Yeah.
Compared to most politicians,
he's been so consistent. Yeah.
Although there has been times where I've seen video clips of like Bernie contradicting himself on like immigration, or like I think. Wasn't he in favor of the war in 2001?
Oh no, definitely not. No,
he was opposed to it.
Yeah. He was in the House at the time, though, not the Senate. So
but didn't he vote for it though?
No, I would be shocked. I can look that up, but I don't think he did.
There was a clip I remember. I don't remember the exact clip, but I think I remember a clip saying that he regretted
the Iraq War.
I think so. Okay. Either that or the what followed.
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
one of those votes that he was just like, we were hoodwinked by President Bush when he told us there was weapons of mass destruction.
Oh yeah, I doubt he meant that he was hoodwinked.
No. I'm being facetious. That's not what he said.
There is an article I see here. Sanders' opposition to the Iraq War was more complicated than he presents. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm pretty sure his stance was against, but I think he still voted for. Which, if you really think about it, back in 2001, if you didn't vote for the war, you were super anti-patriotic.
Yeah. Well, here, okay, Senator Brace, this is the NBC News. Sanders' opposition to the Iraq War was more complicated than he presents. He has for years cast his opposition to the Iraq War as near absolute. Here, okay, this is more helpful. PolitiFact, Bernie Sanders is voting on wars in particular. Bernie Sanders' voting records on wars is mixed. He casts votes affirming military actions in Bosnia, Kosovo, and after 9/11. Okay, he did vote for military efforts after 9/11. Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Social pressure. I mean, and I remember George Bush had like his approval rating shot up to like 90%.
Of course.
So it's like, I would do it. I couldn't imagine having been a fully grown adult at the time.
Oh man, I was
like an aware person. You were like 10, right?
I was 11. Well, yeah, I had just turned 11 because my birthday is a month before. And dude, I kid you not. So check this out. So the day of 9/11. Obviously, we're in the West Coast.
9/11.
Yeah.
September 11th.
September 11th, 2001.
Yeah.
So normally in the Castro home, I wake up my whole family to get ready to go to school, to get ready to go to bed. Okay. I'm like literally the living alarm clock. I like wake my sisters up, go wake my dad up. My dad tells me, he's like, all right, go start up the car while we get ready. Anyway, long story short, I go to wake up my dad, and he says, turn on the TV so we can see what the weather's like. And I turn on the TV, and the first plane has already crashed. So the everyone's on the news. Like whatever channel you're flipping on, it's the towers are on there. Yeah, one of them smoking. And as I'm watching, I'm like shocked, like what's going on? And as my dad turns around, we see the second plane crash live into the second tower. And my dad, I'll never forget this. My dad's first thing he says is, "Oh man, this is a great movie. What movie is this?"
Oh, dude, that has to be a bit. Oh my god.
Yeah, man. I'll never forget it because I just turned around like, this is the news, Dad? He's like, what? And then sure enough, I was like, do we still gotta go to school? And he's like, yeah, get ready.
Oh, and then did you go watch it at school?
No, because we didn't have TVs at school.
Okay.
We didn't have any live TVs. We only had like the ones that, back in the day played VHSs because they didn't have enough money for the DVDs yet. But we were talking about it and we were all like shocked, like, oh my God, are they going to attack? What's going to happen over here? We lived in San Leandro. San Leandro is not like important in the grand scheme of the country. So the teachers, the smart teachers that were like, internationally aware was like, calm down, nothing's gonna happen to us. Now the people in San Francisco and LA and Sacramento, they gotta worry about, but we'll be fine.
Yeah, in major cities always are. It's always a threat, always a concern in major cities.
But you're right, absolutely. Like right after 9/11, like
you're making jokes.
American unity just like backed up anything Bush said. Anything Bush and Cheney.
Yeah, not good. That sort of group mentality, that group think, it's not good. And like the undermining democracy, when it goes hand in hand with like the undermining democracy kind of vibe of like Bush getting elected,
Well, the Patriot Act followed shortly after.
The Patriot Act, that was an icky era of history. The Patriot Act was a bad. Yeah. Have you seen the movie Snowden?
The one that came out in theaters?
I think it came out in theater. Yeah, well, it must have been.
2018, 2017?
Probably something like that. It had Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It was Snowden. The
Okay.
guy from Inception.
Yeah.
That was a good movie. I thought. You like it?
I followed a lot of what Snowden does. I don't think he's a traitor.
Me neither. Not at all.
Granted, he did break some rules, but in the grand scheme of things, he was whistleblowing on people who were doing inappropriate stuff that they weren't.
Illegal stuff. If the government doesn't have to follow their own laws, then what are we doing?
Illegal stuff, and not only that, but also lying about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was the whole thing, is that they had said, like, no, absolutely, we don't track your information. Why would you think so?
And that was in the movie. They even showed Obama saying shit like that.
Yeah. So I'm like, in the grand scheme of things, like, I know some people think it's very, or some people feel it's very unpopular to say that Snowden is a hero. I don't think heroes exist really, but I definitely think that he's a man who took a lot of risk for a greater good.
For our country, I think he's I shouldn't call him it. You're right. We shouldn't deify him, right? But I think he did a good thing. Ultimately, these things are always messy. That's politics, right? That's power. These things are never, he did a service to the American people. I feel pretty comfortable saying that.
There's also a part of me that feels like he knew what was going to happen, given how intelligent he was about how he did it. So he probably, I don't know, like I'm sure he misses home and family and anybody else he might have connections with out here, but he probably prepared himself for exile.
Yeah, if Trump wasn't a total ineffectual, I don't know, if Trump meant a word he said about draining the swamp, he would have brought Snowden and Assange.
Dude, I kid you not, I was like, if he gives presidential immunity to Snowden, like that would sway so many people.
People would have loved that.
Yeah, like there's certain things, like that's why I never really hold any political candidate to be like on a pedestal. Like everybody's capable of anything. Obama was capable of deportations and a bunch of drone bombings. Trump was capable of trying to resolve Korean relationships and fighting China toe to toe. Granted, probably not the smartest way of fighting China, but still, capable of standing up for American values in some sense.
But the border stuff, that genuinely was an atrocity.
The separation of kids at the border?
Yeah.
It's a new level, man. It's a new level. It's crazy to think about that that they were separating them. But I don't know if I told you this, but I did a research paper when I was an undergrad about repatriated Mexican Americans. Did I ever talk to you about that?
No.
Yeah, so when I was in DC, I went to go work for a nonprofit organization called Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, also known as MALDEF. They're one of the few nonprofits, national nonprofits, that provide legal services to underrepresented communities to try to fight against, significantly biased or racial bills that impact disparagingly against, people of color, not just Latinos, but, obviously
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I went to go work with them for about a semester. And while I was there, I did a research paper on Mexican American repatriation. Now, the history behind this is that in the 1930s, right around the time of the Depression, obviously the Depression hit and a lot of people lost their jobs, right? The economy's down. First time it's been down since that time. I think they call it Black Tuesday. A lot of people committed suicide. Unemployment rate was up the roof. Lo and behold, who do they start blaming? Immigrants.
Yeah, because you can just look at their skin and
Well, they see immigrants doing the jobs people don't want to do, and at least they're working, and they're like, they're taking our jobs. I could be doing that job, right? It's like
no, you actually wouldn't want it. You wouldn't,
I mean, people find a scapegoat, and it just so happens that historically it's always been immigrants one way or another. Even though immigrants is essentially what build most of the country, whether it's African immigrants that became slaves, Asian immigrants that built the railroads, or Mexican immigrants, or Latin American immigrants, or other kind of immigrants.
Irish immigrants. Who built the bars, built the consumer base of the bars.
Those are very. I feel like there's a sense of sarcasm coming from you, but I don't.
I'm part Irish. I can say that. Yeah. No.
So I say those crucial bars, man.
I respect bars. Have been around for hundreds of years. They're an institution of humanity. I respect them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, bars are cool.
But going back to the repatriation, so what ended up happening is that during this time of great upheaval, Mexico noticed that there was a lot of flack that immigrants and Mexican descent were facing here in the United States. And so they offered, as a way to help alleviate some of that circumstances that they were facing out here, a way back to Mexico. They said, hey, we'll buy you a train ticket, come back to Mexico, come back to your home country. And some people, not all, some people took up advantage of that. Lo and behold, if the American economy is doing bad, guess who else's economy is probably going to do bad? The Mexican economy, because they're closely intertwined. So almost immediately, the Mexican government cancels the program because we're bringing them over to more unemployment rate over here. There's no sense in taking them from one place where they might be established and bringing them to another place where they're completely unestablished. We have nothing to provide for them. So the Mexican government cancels the program almost immediately. And what happens is the American government realizes that there was some political, I don't want to say effect, but more like superficially it's a good political move to get rid of the immigrants, right? To make room for American jobs. And so they start reinstating the program under federal funding indirectly. What would happen is the federal government would provide funds to organizations, local organizations, that would then themselves do rallies in towns, sometimes coordinated rallies of ununiformed officers, where they would line up all people of brown color.
And the goal of the rallies was?
To determine whether or not you were here legally.
Oh, okay. It wasn't like a rally to persuade. It was just like
a roundup, essentially.
Yeah, more of a roundup.
Yeah.
Okay, that's terrifying.
And they would do it in traditionally known Latino communities. So like public parks and certain. They would literally close off exits and get everybody tell them to line up and show us your documentation. And if you did have your documentation, sometimes even then they would ignore it and put you straight on a train back to Mexico. So you ended up, and that wasn't the only instance that was prevalent. There's actually historical documents. I read a book that talked about these incidents, but there was also incidents of the government, the state governments, denying people food stamps and welfare unless they accepted a ticket back to Mexico. So then you have some families who were not even trying to go to back to Mexico, but were denied resources to survive unless they took that.
Wow, that's terrible.
And what ended up happening is that many of these families had children that were American born. So I think the figures ended up going to close to 200,000 American citizens were deported in the 1930s as a result of this. And that was the repatriation of their parents, but also the deportation of American citizens. Granted, they were children. Actually, have you heard of Cruz Reynoso? Mm. Cruz Reynoso recently passed away. Cruz Reynoso was the first Latino Mexican American Supreme Court Justice of the state of California. Cruz Reynoso was also a deported Mexican American during those times. He was a very young child, I would imagine a baby, given his age, but his family was deported during those times, during the repatriation program.
Here, would you write his name down?
Yeah. Cruz Reynoso, C-R-U-Z, Rey, R-E-Y-N-O, I believe is also Z-O, or if not, it's an S, one of the two, I'm messing up. But yeah, so he recently passed away, but essentially his story was that he grew up in Mexico for the longest time, not knowing he was an American citizen. Once he was told, or once he found out he was an American citizen, he made his way back to the United States, ended up joining the military, went on to be a successful military member, veteran, came back, went to law school, went to Berkeley Law School, one of the larger, better schools in the country, and then went on to have a very successful career, I think also working with farm unions in the Central Valley, and then eventually working his way up to the California Supreme Court.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful story. Berkeley grad.
Yeah, Berkeley grad. And he ended up teaching at UC Davis Law School for a
That's
bit.
awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Got a chance to meet him in person one time.
That's so cool. Wow.
Yeah, he was a really cool person. I wasn't as close to him as a lot of my peers were, because they were more into like social justice and like the connections and the experiences that he could bring to their pathways. But I did get a chance to talk to him a little bit about my research paper that I did. Because ultimately, going back to the research paper, I was comparing reparations of slavery reparations, Japanese American reparations, and whether or not it was plausible or even possible to attain reparations for these group of deported American citizens. Given that it was in the 1930s, these group of individuals were slowly dying off, not many remained, and the nonprofit that I work with was interested in finding out, in comparison to these other two communities that suffered significant by virtue of the government, whether or not they were eligible for reparations, and if so, what paths. I would like to think that maybe my research was not as, my conclusions were not as welcomed as what they thought they would be, because ultimately what I ended up discovering through my research was that Japanese American reparations being a successful case and slavery reparations being an unsuccessful case.
Well, there hasn't been there was Reconstruction, but there still hasn't been reparations.
Exactly. But there are people who have pursued reparations in some way or another, and it's been unsuccessful. But if you look at it through history, the only, at least the one that at the time that I found that was successful, was Japanese American reparations after World War II for the internment camps. So I did a lot of research on both circumstances, and a lot of the barriers that prevents people from attaining reparations in general is the concept of sovereign immunity. And sovereign immunity is something that we inherited from Britain, and it's kind of part of our common law within the United States, where it's like if a sovereign entity conducts an act that is reprehensible even, there's no way for it to be held accountable unless it itself lowers its sovereign immunity, because it always has that affirmative defense.
Okay, I'm lost. I need you to.
Sure.
Sovereign immunity. Can you define that for me?
Sure. So, this was 10 years ago, so I don't know the exact wording, but sovereign immunity is the concept that a governing entity is immune from any liability for its actions.
That sounds terrible, and not like what we're supposed to have, right? Because we have like the Geneva, there's like international law, right?
Right. Well, this concept is older than the Geneva Convention.
And we have a constitution governing our government, so like we have like checks and balances built in.
Right, but if you can imagine, kind of like bringing it to a little bit something more prevalent nowadays, it's like police immunity from prosecution. It's kind of along the same lines, where it's like it's almost like a government. Why would a government allow you to sue it? You know, if it intended well, and you know it serves a larger purpose.
Just for this, I guess the same reason why a government would give you any civil rights is just because the people fought hard enough for it. You know, it's like the tendency of power is to be authoritarian, for governments to be authoritarian, and yada yada. I mean, it is hard to get these civil rights, but I mean, we have a right to a trial and a police that will defend ourselves, you know. So I guess just to like, I know you're even like playing devil's advocate, so I don't even really need to play devil's advocate off your devil's advocate. That's too much, you know. I know you probably agree with me on this stuff, but
devil squared.
Right. And civil liberties are hard fought, you know.
I agree. But in particular, when it comes to like suing, so there's a difference between criminal liability and civil liability, right?
Criminal court and civil court.
Yeah. So criminal liability, I think, is pretty cut and dry. Like if somebody's doing something that goes against what the Constitution says, then it should be stopped immediately. But as far as civil liability, that's to hold an entity financially responsible, essentially, for its actions. That is a whole realm separate. And it operates
literally different types of law.
Exactly, right? It operates very differently. And one of the, like I said, this is an affirmative defense for a government entity whose action was sanctioned by the government. Because if you think about what a representative government is a government that's been given authorization by the majority of the community. So if a government is acting in accordance to that authority, then its actions are sanctioned by the community.
But the community,
at least in ideals.
Because the community doesn't have a direct say in whether or not Derek Chauvin kneels on George Floyd's neck. You know, we don't have a direct say in these actions that, you know, and these, like, there's always a responsibility on the individual, right? Like
But think about it this way, because you just touched on a very interesting example. All we've been talking about is holding that officer responsible for his actions. But have you ever heard about the liability that comes from the city and or the government that employs that officer?
You're talking about like structural reform. It would help to like, you know, because I don't know about liability, but like we had structural, like in where I'm from, Madison, Wisconsin, all police officers need to have a bachelor's degree, and that seems to like we have a much lower rate of police brutality also. Like that seems to, you know, it seems like the police issue might be one of like we could make a few big strides with just a few simple fixes in my mind. Like what if we had body cameras that always have to be on and bachelor's degrees for all cops, just for instance, you know?
Those are very good ideas to implement, and I think that they're within the sound of reasonability and would actually be substantially helpful for everybody. But that's not what I'm talking about when I say liability. When I say liability, it literally would mean what responsibility financially you have for your actions. So when I say the city and the government's liability for hiring this particular officer who acted in this inappropriate way and took somebody's life, that's what I mean by liability. It's like how much do we hold the city responsible financially for hiring this person and for keeping him and allowing him to conduct himself in a way.
Yeah, like did George Floyd's family get new money?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Have you heard any conversation about
that
regarding the city?
That would be interesting to look up if they got any money.
And my guess is that the city and the government will not be responsible because of sovereign immunity so long as George Floyd did not act within what his direction was. Because if George Floyd acts within the direction of the government, then technically the government is responsible for his actions, right?
Yeah, but he didn't.
And therein lies where the city would clean their hands and say, hey, we're not responsible because he did something he wasn't supposed to do.
Yes. Okay.
So you can go after him financially because he acted inappropriately.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. That does make perfect sense.
Yeah. So with reparations, like there's several different hurdles, and I'm sure there's people who devote like their lifetime studying ways.
Right, it's the annoying individualistic, well, hey, I'm not the one that owns slaves. It's like, that really irritate that argument, really.
Right.
I'm totally in favor of reparations. Germany did a full-on reparations for the Jews, like full-on.
And we did too. We did too.
Well, we did Reconstruction.
No. I'm not talking about African American black people.
Oh.
I'm talking about Japanese Americans. We
We
actually signed a reparations bill in the 1980s for Japanese internment camps. The crux. So again, I compared successful being Japanese American, unsuccessful being black African American reparations. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the hurdles that the black community faced was the connection, the nexus of connection between the actions of the people and the victims. So again, like you were mentioning earlier, that wasn't me, that was my ancestors, right? Mm-hmm. But also, you didn't suffer slavery, so why is it that you get the benefit?
Because
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying this is the arguments people make, right?
Should we explain why for anyone who might not know who's making those arguments? Okay, here's my best crack. Correct me, or if you have a better version of this. It's because there's a really great interview, not great because of the interviewer, but great because of the guest, Marianne Williamson on Dave Rubin's show. Dave Rubin, she makes a great argument against, in favor of reparations, basically, and she says, if you inherit, she puts it this way, if you inherit a company, you inherit all of their debts. You inherit their assets and their debts. The United States has assets, we have debts too. If we want to enjoy this, beautiful, the American dream, all the stuff we love about America, we should also all vote to pay our debts to the ways that, because of course, anyone who has a real understanding of social and economic justice in the United States understands that people of color are desperately, there's a total lack of, the fact that the United States is a racist nation is inseparable from the economic injustice that people of color face. If you read Adolph Reed, that's a lot of what he talks about, which I only know about him because of Michael Brooks, a political commentator. But all these issues of social and economic justice are intertwined.
Sure.
From what I understand.
So were social studies and the law fail to coincide? Because everything you said is absolutely true. But where the law, as far as the law is concerned, there needs to be a direct connection. And a lot of the times, if you think about, especially slavery, dude, slavery, sometimes they were so disparaging to slaves that they didn't even bother to keep track of where they sold them or who they sold them to. Although some records do exist for some families, there's a lot of families and a lot of slaves whose there is no physical record to lineate who derives from whom. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? How let alone the descendants of that slave. Do you know what I mean?
They were stripped of their ancestry. And it's one of the most grotesque things humans have ever done.
Exactly. So although there may be a direct connection from the benefiters of the people of slavery, who benefited from slavery and direct ancestry, mm-hmm. and you could look through companies as well, because companies absorb each other all the time. There is not as clear when it comes to the ancestral family of slaves and their descendants. So the law has a hard time drawing the line between the 2 points. How do you know that, again, playing the position of the law.
Right. Yeah.
How do I know?
Some people use
how do I know Johnson here is the direct descendant of this particular slave? You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. A lot of the times there is some records, but there's not a lot for everyone.
Okay.
And that's where it becomes because there's no clear line, it's hard.
It is where it becomes messy.
It becomes messy. So that's one obstacle. Another obstacle is what I told you, the affirmative defense of sovereign immunity, which is it was legal at the time. So because it was legal and sanctioned, according to the people who voted in these government leaders, the government holds no liability for its actions that it did in favor of the people who voted for them.
In favor of popular will. Yeah, okay. So that the more compelling of those two arguments to me is the one about it's hard to trace people back to their
Sure.
ancestors, right? Yeah, that is the more because I always favor morality over legality, but that is the tricky thing, just logistically. Is
both of these things go hand in hand as to why you have never seen a successful case of slavery reparations.
I mean, could you do you have to be an eighth African, do like a 23andMe, you have to be an eighth African, it has to be from Africa. I don't know.
It's not impossible, but the issue is that it's very time consuming. It's a lot of resource consumption, and there is no guarantee, right? And that's the thing. It's you would need to do all that work ahead of time, so then you could present it to the courts and then show the courts, look, here's the line. Here's where this particular slave owner connects directly to this particular descendant. Here's where this particular slave is connected to this particular descendant.
It could be like a Department of Reparations where it's like the DMV. You have to bring your papers.
But again, you're right. It's not an immediate thing.
Yeah, it would be difficult.
It's a generational thing, I would imagine, to find all that out. And the longer we take, the more it's going to be. But anyway, so that's the case for what's going on with slavery reparations and why the law.
Okay, actually, I'm going to grab some coffee.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you want any? I actually have iced coffee this time, if you want, so it would be acceptable for that.
Sure, I'll take a little bit. Thank you. But essentially, for Japanese reparations that happened, it's a completely different story.
Well, it's a smaller. If I were to guess, it might be easier to do it with a smaller population.
It's not even that. It's a combination of several different things. So another aspect of sovereign immunity is that you have to be able to hold a specific entity responsible and show that the entity did things, again, sanctioned by the government, right? So when it comes to Japanese American reparations, I forget what the executive order was, but our president at the time, FDR signed an executive order that specifically directed that Japanese Americans be placed in these internment camps, right? I forget what the order is, but I know it's existent out there. And then when people researched the history behind that order, they found out that there was no actual tangible reason, or not tangible reason, but arguable reason for that order other than racism, other than to target a specific group of people.
Yeah, that action, well, here, I shouldn't talk away from the mic, but that action by FDR was deplorable.
Right, that action was completely deplorable by the president. But that particular action and that particular order, because there's records of it, connecting government action sanctioned at the highest level, kind of doesn't allow the federal government to clean their hands and say we didn't have anything to do with it. There's direct evidence showing they played a huge role.
And so this is where I go back to how the law isn't like isn't computer coding where it's binary ones and zeros and certain mechanical ways that things have to happen, right? It's intertwined with politics and it's a struggle for power between different groups of people. So I'm certain that if we got the right president, we could have an executive order enacting some form of reparations. The law be damned. I'm sure we could do it.
So here's where it gets more complicated. So you got that executive order that ties in directly from the government, putting Japanese Americans in internment camps, right? You also have, because it's the 1940s, a lot better documentation showing which Japanese Americans were placed in which camp and during what periods of time. So you have not only a nexus of the people who did the actions, but there's also a nexus of the victims. And so you can directly connect the victims to the people who took the action of putting them in internment camps. So there satisfies the law for sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity is one of those things where even if you show the nexus, the government still is not financially responsible, financially liable. However, because there's no denying the history of this bill, this executive order, it was racially motivated. it's very bad aesthetically for the government.
Period.
Politically, to say like, oh, we shouldn't be held responsible. This was a thing of the past. Mm-hmm. So what happened with Japanese Americans is that the federal government waived sovereign immunity because of this executive order, because there was no denying its involvement.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
but had they not waived it, no reparations.
Mm-hmm. So I was in traffic court the other day. I swear this connects.
What'd you do?
It's going 105, and that's all I'll mention is that I was going 105 miles per hour for the podcast. That's all.
Going in 5, and the cocaine lines on the dashboard. Woo!
All right, no, exactly. And so I not really though, but I went to traffic court, and there was this dude.
It was probably for passing a red light.
Yeah, no, there was this dude that was just, his whole life was fucked, and he was there, and he was like, my wife died, and her car got repoed, and he had like 1 million tickets, and the judge just said that it was dismissed in the name of justice.
In the interest of justice?
Yeah, I was like, that's badass. I like that you can just do that. You know?
Well, at certain levels, judges have that authority. Traffic court being like the least important level.
Yeah.
Because you really think about what does traffic court serve, other than trying to protect the safety of
raising money for California's expensive ass government.
Exactly.
All right, I gotta be. I'll be right back. Entertain the people. So.
All right, people. All right, audience of Dane's World. This is Angel Castro coming to you live from the living room of Dane Nichols. We've been talking over the last couple of minutes regarding race, a little bit of politics. We started getting into reparations. Talked a little bit about Cruz Reynoso, if you didn't catch it. Cruz Reynoso, unfortunately, recently passed away, but it's somebody I would recommend you guys Google to learn more about. A really important figure in California's history, not just for Latinos, but people of color in general. But now I'm sitting here while Dane takes a leak. And I'm just staring at his beautiful TV, which is showing a screensaver of a waterfall. It's a lush green space. It looks like a cliff full of trees. And through the middle of the rocks and the trees, there's a gentle river flowing down onto a waterfall. The picture is still, but there's a lot of detail within it. You could see the foaminess of the water as it hits the rocks and kind of follows through. It's also 11:40, so I'm a little bit tired. You're gonna have to forgive me. We've been going to open mics. We tried hitting up an open mic today. Got a little bit late. We didn't get a chance to go on. So we tried to go on another one where we faced what is commonly known as the bump, where we got there early enough and signed up to do the open mic. But then a couple people came from out of town and had to ask for a favor or two from the host to go up a little earlier, so then we suffered the consequences of having to wait a little longer. No worries though, it's part of the game. It's aspiring comics. You gotta pay your dues sometimes. You gotta be understanding that other people have made connections and friendships stemming particularly longer than at least our connections that reap some benefits. But yeah, that's why we're doing this so late. I'm imagining the podcast will probably be going up sometime soon tomorrow morning, depending on what time Dane wakes up. Given that he's
I can up like that. I'm a night owl.
Given that he stays up pretty late.
Mm-hmm. You know it.
Welcome back, Dane.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Did you have fun with the people?
I hope they enjoyed it as much as I did.
Right, they're here with us in spirit.
At least.
Remind me how to pronounce this name. Cruz Reynoso.
Reynoso.
But Cruz Reynoso.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Inspiring figure for you and your peers?
Oh, well, he just in general, man. Very interesting guy. Interesting life. Like I said, veteran. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if he was decorated, but I'm sure he was.
You're not sure, but you are sure.
Yeah,
I know, I get that.
I'm not sure if he, because obviously you're talking about veterans from like the 1960s and stuff, right? So it's like 1950s, 1960s. I don't know if it was the Korean War. I think it was that one that he went to. Mm-hmm. But you always hear of like those old school wars. Like most of the people who are still alive are decorated veterans.
Yeah.
You almost never hear of a veteran who's like, "Oh, this guy is a dishonored I'm sure they exist, but not the ones that become Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, definitely not. No, but okay. I mean, is there more to add about reparations, Japanese or?
Sure. So where it comes down to the Mexican American reparations is that in my conclusion of my paper. Sorry. One last part about Japanese Americans. It was also the 1980s, the booming 80s, where everybody was doing cocaine, the economy was doing great. So if you really think about it, it was an amalgamation of like, we have this direct evidence linking the federal government, right? We have these direct victims that are still alive to these days, right? And then we also have a booming economy where money is not so much of a concern. So you take all those factors into consideration, and we get the executive order that approved reparations for Japanese Americans. Now, when I was writing this paper back in 2011, I don't know if you were too cognizant of 2011, but it was like the middle of the recession.
Yeah, well, I mean, it started in 2008. Was it really still in the middle of it in 2011?
I'm pretty sure the recession went on to like graduate in 2013.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. We were still like right when I graduated college, like it was barely starting to get better.
Okay.
There was still a lot of unemployment rates at the time. So when I picture the recession in 2011, it was like the middle of it because Obama was still campaigning too. For trying to get the second election in 2012. This was fall of 2011, by the way. Anyway, so when I write this paper, I compare these two circumstances to Mexican American reparations, and I note a couple of things. One, documentation, because the repatriation that happened in the 30s was significantly less documented than the internment camps of the Japanese. So that's one. Two, there was no direct executive order that existed showing how the federal government funded these organizations and these state institutions for how they conducted themselves in deporting these American citizens.
There's no record, you said?
There's no direct link. There's no direct link. And so because there's no direct link, you can't hold the federal government as responsible as with the Japanese Americans. Because you gotta have that direct link to make them drop their guard and waive sovereign immunity. Without that direct link, there's no reason for them to say, why are we going to allow ourselves to be responsible for
unless it's just so politically disastrous that they have to, unless the popular will becomes that.
Exactly. But it usually only happens when there's like some kind of documentation or evidence showing, hey, don't lie to us.
But I do bet I bet there could be some. I do tend to think that the future of the country is a more left one, and that we could see like reparation. I think we could see reparations for slavery.
I think we should have reparations for slavery. But it's also a matter of the times, and that goes into my last point, which was because we were still in the middle of the recession, economic times were hard. You'd be hard pressed to find a senator who'd be like, yeah, let's spend thousands of dollars on people that like we hurt 70 or 80 years ago.
We actually totally can do it, though. I bet. I mean, we live in the most unequal society, one of the most unequal societies of all time. I mean, the top 3 families own more wealth than the bottom half of the country. Well, tens of millions of people are in poverty and without healthcare. I mean, it seems pretty like the notion to me that we can skim more off the top and like raise the floor at least somewhat in the U.S. is like sky's blue stuff, like I'm pretty certain of that.
I don't disagree with you, but what my point was that given all these circumstances, the nebulous connection, right, the sovereign immunity still being a strong shield that the government can hold, and then on top of that you have unfavorable economic conditions at the time to be giving away money when that money, quote unquote, maybe could be used for stimulating the economy to lower the unemployment rate.
But of course we understand that's not how it works now. We're starting to understand that.
Sure.
You and I understand.
Sure. Yeah. But at the time when I wrote this paper in 2011, I said it's not a good sign for likelihood of reparations given these circumstances. Now, I also came across what was very surprising to me, which was there's different types of reparations. There's not just monetary. Monetary reparations are what everyone always discusses. because at the end of the day, money talks, shit walks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to make somebody whole again, pay what you broke away from them. That's what we all want. That's what we all talk about. Mm-hmm. But in my paper, I argued that that wasn't the only way to bring justice to these individuals. Because as a Latino, as a person of color, as a Mexican American, I had never heard of these historical events. I had never heard of these, 200 million Mexican Americans who were deported until I had gotten to the college level. And I grew up in California. Yeah.
Damn. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a significant number. And that's an underestimation.
Damn.
Because there was no documentation, so there's no specific numbers. But anyway,
still no reparations.
Still no reparations. But so what I suggested in the paper as an alternative was state and local bills mandating the teachings of this historical events. So kind of the same way, I don't know how it was in Wisconsin, but here in California, I remember specifically like in 4th grade, like there was a section of time where we literally just covered Japanese internment camps because of the atrocities that we committed. You learn history to avoid it in the future. But we never did that for repatriation. And so I was suggesting
this
that...
is the first time I'm learning about repatriation.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's other similar atrocities that happen to different groups in different times, right? Mm-hmm. So my whole thing was like, look, if we can't pay people money right now because of the economic times and because of the nebulous connections, because of the bad documentation, then at the very least we can implement a requirement that these circumstances and these historical events be taught so that kids growing up understand that internment camps wasn't the only thing we've done that's unjust, even within California. Do you know what I mean?
It seems never ending, the things I learn about the United States government, what we've done or what we're continuing to do that's immoral. I mean, with it, and I'm a total believer in education. Education is totally always a good answer to help improve society. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, man. That was my position too. Is like, look, at least don't let their history be lost. Mm-hmm. It was ultimately what I came down to. Like I said, my supervisor at the time was like, oh, I feel like your paper's a little bit pessimistic. But ultimately, he was a lawyer, and I wasn't a lawyer at the time or had gone to law school at all. So his position was like, you're right, and we don't want to pursue this legally because we also don't want to set a precedent. We don't want to pursue the legal route of reparations until we know it's going to be certain, because if we pursue it and get denied, that sets a legal precedent for any future cases for reparations to be denied based on that.
Yeah, that's the ultimate political fear, is losing in a big way, in a way that so for me, my biggest issue that I care about, probably my biggest issue is Medicare for all. I want health insurance to be totally decommodified and common Bernie Sanders type stuff, and that there was an effort in the 90s led by Nancy Pelosi actually, and it lost, and it's just left this huge scar on the efforts to make Medicare for all a reality. So that's totally, I get that. That's a thing in politics, is like, like the worst outcome in 2020 would have been Bernie going up against Trump and losing for me, because that would have been like, oh look, someone who's that far left can't do it, and so that's like the same thing as the reparations. Yeah, you want to make sure when you take your shot, it's a good one.
Well, that's essentially what the Democrats' argument was for picking Biden, right? Like they wanted to make sure that it was going to be a sure win as opposed to a risky win.
Mm-hmm. And I still think Biden was hella risky. Actually, I think that, and I think that I think that the whole notion of like trying to do pick a centrist to like appeal to the broadest set of people. I like going back to what we were saying earlier about it being about personality. I think Bernie had just as good of a chance. I totally reject the premise that Bernie was less electable than Biden. I'm totally just switching it to like fuck it, Bernie, like
all the way, baby, all the way.
Here's how we can still win.
He can still do it. He's still young enough to hold a third election in 2024.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no, that does. It's like when when I was running recently, I saw a cat shaking its ass, getting ready to pounce on a squirrel, and it like just kept shaking its ass, like never pouncing, and it's because it was trying to wait till the squirrel was in the perfect spot. It's like a thing in politics too. It's like wait for the squirrel to be right where you want it, and then before you get reparations.
That's the exact analogy I always hear Nancy Pelosi say.
Hey, oh yeah, she always says that shit.
She's always shaking her ass, just waiting to jump on it.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to see her and Kamala twerk. That would be fun. Oh my god, that Tim Dillon tweet when Kamala got, or when Biden and Kamala got sworn in, he was saying, Kamala just arrested me. I'm not even upset, just proud to be a part of history.
Did I ever tell you I worked for the Alameda County District Attorney's Office where she came from?
Oh, while she was there?
Yeah. No, not while she was there. She was already, by that point, she was already, I think, I forget the term for it, but she was already working for the state government as a representative. I forget the position she was in. But it was before she became senator.
District attorney, maybe?
No, well, district attorney is for the specific counties.
Okay.
So she was working for the state. Maybe she was a state.
She was like the chief top prosecutor for the state.
Yes,
right?
yes. I forget the term or the title for it. I should know. But I also went to Hastings. Kamala Harris went to Hastings.
Okay.
So I got a chance to be in the spaces that she was before she became a senator, and ultimately vice president.
Yeah.
It was very interesting what people had to say about her.
Yeah, tell me.
Well, at Hastings, it seemed like people say that she wasn't the best student.
I don't like her, so I'll tell you that.
You don't like her?
Yeah, don't worry about me being a fan.
Oh,
I'm not.
Do tell.
Well, first off, she was a leftist for a long time, and then she abandoned the what I consider to be the left, which is like supporting Medicare for all and Green New Deal and things like that.
At what point did she abandon it?
When she started running for president, honestly, I think.
Okay.
Maybe it was a little bit before that. But
she played on those conservative values?
Yeah, she moved more center, which is, whatever.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's bad. It's an abandonment of principles, and it's and her shit of like locking up truant kids. Obviously, I'm not gonna like that, and just in general, she's just another trash centrist in my mind. Like, I don't like her.
Which is why you don't mind talking about her twerking.
Yeah, well, she is kind of good looking. She's good enough. She's probably one of the better, if not the best looking vice president of all time. I don't know. Al Gore could give her a run for her money, but at the time. But yeah, I don't know. She's probably the best looking. That's all that really matters.
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
I'm derailing this. Did you want to talk any more about your research paper? Was there any more?
No, that was pretty much the conclusion.
Any more that? Yeah. So I mean, that is a good idea. I mean, we should learn more about that. What are the lessons we learned? We should learn more about all parts of history. Oh yeah. I've been thinking recently, like, just it's really started to weigh on me recently. Like, there's thousands of years of history of like the whole world. Like, the whole world's been doing history this whole time. No way. Yeah, no, I've got to learn about it, man. Like, because I could never possibly learn. There's always more history out there. History is such a. I'm starting to get pretty into history. I wouldn't major in it or anything, but like I'm curious. I'm taking a world history 1500 to present class next semester.
Oh wow!
Fun. Yeah.
Dude, the history is pretty intense, man, and it's very interesting to find out truths and facts about history, especially about things that you thought you understood or knew, and then completely have like that world shattered by like more in-depth knowledge of that. There's a lot of times throughout school that I was just like, what the hell? Like we talked earlier today, before we did this podcast on our way to do the open mics, we talked a little bit about Latin America history and some of the things that Fidel Castro and Che Guevara experienced as they were growing up and becoming the people that they would eventually become, the revolutionary leaders. But it's kind of like what you said, like it's almost like a never-ending pursuit. Just because there's so much history. There's so much history. I mean, it extends as far as the our ability to record goes back. You know.
Yeah, our ability to write stuff down.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, what's the term? The discussion continues. It's always a continued discussion. Never like, you know, that's being a human can be pretty lonely, and I think it helps to like look back in history and like engage in these traditions, like engage with other, you know, read what other people have had to say throughout history, because like, I don't know, you have these thoughts throughout life, and then you realize that like philosophers have come up with them like hundreds of years ago already. So it's nice to like read about history, read human thought leading up to now, and then like continue to develop human thought on your own by like putting out a podcast or like writing books, you know, or whatever. Like that's what, like, I don't know, I'm starting to get, I was always so anti-school in high school, and now I'm like really starting to become like a academia apologist, you know, or like
apologist,
or like a defender, you know.
Sure.
I think it's good. It's a good, you know.
Your mention of philosophers like contemplating all these things back in the day just made me think, like, I wonder what the first dick joke was.
Yeah, it was probably as early as we had humans, or as soon as early as consciousness. Maybe that was the first thing that like a monkey ate like a magic mushroom and then made a dick joke. And that was the beginning of consciousness.
I'm sure.
Have you heard the stoned ape theory?
No, what is it?
It's that humans gain consciousness because of doing psychedelics.
Oh.
Yeah. We were like in our like early, you know, evolutions that led to us being, you know, humans, and like the between, you know, and like the, I don't know, whatever it is, the early human forms. I forget what the names of them are, but like one of them was Lucy, like the early human forms before the you could say late primate forms or early human, you know.
Right, those weird ass words like Australopithecus.
Yeah. Stuff that I don't know the words for. Yeah. No, so during
those are hard words. I have a hard time pronouncing them.
Same. So those words, those ones, the theory is they took mushrooms and gained consciousness, and yeah, wouldn't that be cool?
Dude, that's pretty intense, man. Yeah. Imagine the first monkey just tripping on fucking shrooms.
Yeah.
Just like fucking melting into the trees, like trying to explain that to his fellow monkeys, like, oh.
Oh man, that would be a lonely monkey who's like, guys, like, I mean, imagine experiencing that. All the other monkeys are just like eating bananas and shit.
What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
You're like, guys, you gotta try.
You know, if anything, evolutionarily speaking, all the other monkeys would have stayed away from wherever the fuck that monkey. Right? They're just like, you know what? That guy's tripping balls. Let's not eat that.
We killed Aristotle. Fucking, we killed Jesus. You know, according to the, you know, the thing.
The good book of the Lord. Are you saying?
All right. Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of look at me like, oh, is he a religious person?
I don't mind. Want to do religion though? I mean, I see myself pretty tolerant.
Off the bat, man, I'm atheist.
Atheist? Okay, cool. I'm looking forward to having more atheists on the show, and because I like to kind of argue with a certain type of atheist. I think Will might have been this a little bit more than you, but like I don't know. My mom is pretty dogmatically atheist, and I have a streak of being really dogmatically atheist and like anti-theist and like and like saying that religion is a corrosive force in society. But I actually have been prone to like defending religion lately and actually arguing for religion. I think that religion offers. I think a lot of humans naturally want some sort of spiritual outlet, and we want some sort of community, some sort of spiritual community. And I think that we, you know, some people are, you know, going to form spiritual communities in, you know, untraditional ways that aren't maybe labeled as spiritual, like whether it be an open mic or, you know, when friends come over for a football game, maybe that's a spiritual experience. But I think for some people there still is a need or a want to go to some sort of church or temple. And you know, I hope that we see people, you know, moving towards less harmful forms of religion. You know?
Well, as somebody who was not raised in a secular manner, I was deeply ingrained within the Catholic Church growing up, and then exposed to several different types of Christianity, as well as Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, and I mean exposed in the very literal sense. Like we had Mormons come and read their Bible to us. I read the Mormon Bible a couple times. I went to Jehovah's Witness churches. I went to Baptist churches. I went to, obviously, Catholicism. I did my first communion, my confirmation. So I'm very much
no Buddhism,
exposed. No, not Buddhism.
No Hinduism.
I didn't know enough Asians.
No Sikhs. No.
I didn't know enough. Oh, Sikh. I didn't learn about what even Sikhs were until college, when my roommate showed me what a Sikh was, because he was Sikh. Mm. But as far as like the religious practices of it, I'm totally ignorant of it. Still to this day. Mostly, yeah, and actually even Judaism, I didn't even know what the hell Judaism was until I came to college. That's when they were like, oh, he's Jewish. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, does he like do something different than what other Christians do? Like, I really have no idea. And I still, from what I remember, from what I've learned, it seems like the most common type of Jewish person is the one that doesn't practice.
Yeah, just ethnically Jewish.
Yeah. That's a weird one. That's a weird one where your religion is also your race.
Yeah, well, there's kind of a similar thing with people from, heavily Muslim countries or Muslim backgrounds, or families might describe themselves as like, Muslim by, background, or I don't even know.
Well, Islam and being Muslim kind of spans several different ethnicities, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not just isolated to like one particular region, but all the Middle East and all the different cultures that come along with it.
And there's different, I keep using the term flavors. People are going to get mad at me. There's different flavors of Jew.
Coconut
Jew.
Yeah. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Kind of Jews that like to sit in the tropics.
Yeah. No. But, I mean, there's, I don't really understand that stuff. The race and religion, and the connection of, race to religion.
Well, it goes back to tribalism, right? Like, that's like the ultimate form of tribalism, where it's like your religion now becomes your race. Mm-hmm. It's a signal, an identifier, a point of connection, and also a point of separation, where it's like it's obvious that anybody born from the mother is Jewish, but not necessarily from the father.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. So it's very interesting the way religions play out their practices and their traditions. Cutting the tip of your dick off. I never understood how that became a
Yeah, I don't know which side I'm on of that. I've heard compelling arguments both ways.
Are you a traditionalist, or have you been sawed off?
I've been sawed off.
You've been sawed off?
Seems fine.
For non-religious reasons?
Just my mom, I think she did it because of probably a combination of social pressures, and she's also a nurse, and her opinion is that it's
a cleaner,
yeah,
less complicated.
And there is evidence to point to that,
because it's so hard just
I don't know
your dick.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, that's the good counter argument, right? So I don't know because like,
I cast no judgment, by the way.
that's like an Andrew Yang thing, that he wants to end circumcision. Did you follow that?
No, he must have had a horrible experience with it.
Yeah, it's personal. Yeah, no, it's like
so I'm guessing
Yang thing for some reason.
I'm guessing you were circumcised right at birth.
Yeah.
Okay, so before you even had a say.
How about you?
Not at birth.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What's that?
It's a painful memory. Maybe for another time.
Yikes. Yeah, you don't want to have a not right at birth circumcision.
You're gonna have to give me a couple more drinks before we talk about that.
Put that one on the back burner. We'll have you back. We can't do that.
But I do know that we wanted to talk more about law school, so I don't want to miss those topics. So what was it in your head that you wanted to talk about?
Well, what your I don't know. You seem to. So you said that with regards to just you said it was in your mind from a younger age that you might want to go to law school, and then also I think you said something about like a pressure, on yourself that maybe was self-imposed, because you also said that was from a young age you had that idea. So, but then did you say you forgot about, you kind of like, you didn't think about it for a while, and then you did like once you were in undergrad, like start thinking about it?
No. So going back to like the last time we talked, my parents are immigrants. I told you this, I think maybe a little bit off the air. Not sure if I mentioned it during the cast, but my mother wasn't given the opportunity to study. She graduated middle school, and when she graduated middle school, my grandfather was like, "What's the point of women going to school?"
You might have mentioned that.
Yeah. So because of that, she essentially was denied the opportunity to continue pursuing school, And although she had a lot of great potential, I think even her teachers at one point, as she was finishing middle school, would pay for her books just so that she could come to school. Because back in Mexico, you had to pay for your own supplies. Like the school didn't actually provide anything. But when she got to a certain age, she had to just begin working because she had 9 siblings, and my grandfather needed her help to earn money to pay for things at home. So what that translated to was when she had me and my sisters and I, she wanted us, very adamantly told us that we had to pursue education, that this was an opportunity that should not be wasted, that only certain people have the privilege to pursue. And given the circumstances that we had being born in America and her working really, really hard to not have to take us away from that opportunity, she wanted us to make the most of it.
I agree, man. For at least a bachelor's degree, I agree. Yeah, I mean, grad school is, I think, more a personal decision. But
sure.
For at least a bachelor's degree, I 100% agree.
Sure, and that's where that's where the bit of the ignorance when it comes to the immigrant experience, because as a mother who had no formal education outside of middle school, coming to a different country that operates very differently as far as the education system is concerned, she had no idea what it was like, what it would take to go to college, what it would take to go to law school, what it required of you, the sacrifices and or the investments. Mm-hmm. So when we were younger, she would only not even impose but talk to us about her wishes for us. So I would love for you guys.
Classic mothers.
Yeah, they mean well.
Story as old as time. It comes from putting pressure on you to do some shit.
It comes from a good place, because if you try to put your shoes, at least in the particular, I don't know about your mom, maybe a little bit different, but for my mom, if
she's a character.
We could talk about her too.
Yeah, next time. Maybe.
But my mom essentially wanted the best for us, and having always worked night shifts, long night shifts, minimum wage jobs, sometimes facing a lot of racism, a lot of injustice because of her status as an immigrant and inability to speak English properly. So she never wanted us to suffer through those things, and so the way that she saw would be the easiest way for us to avoid that is to become a professional in the sense of the word, as a lawyer or as a doctor or
an elite professional.
Exactly. Yeah. To completely avoid having to experience any of those things. Mm-hmm. So she came from a good place. Now my dad's a little bit different. My dad graduated from middle school and immigrated here to begin high school. So he immigrated as a teenager to the United States. My mom came here as an adult. My dad came here as a teenager, and he dropped out of school because he felt education wasn't for him and he would rather work. This was back in the 80s when it was still optional. So he was always of the pursuit of, or the mentality that we should pursue whatever it is that we want. Whether that coincides with societal expectations or not, he didn't care. As long as we pursued what we wanted. So
that's nice.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a balance. He had high expecting mother, very low expectation father.
It's nice to have one of each.
Yeah, no, it was a great experience, especially when you were trying to get something done. You would go to the other and try to swing the other one's the opposite way. Anyway,
exactly.
But I personally felt, as the oldest of my siblings, as the oldest of 4, as the one who was more in tune with the financial burdens and the societal issues that my parents faced as non-educated people, I, at a very young age, ingrained within myself that it was my responsibility to become a lawyer. Mm-hmm. At the very least, some professional, but in particular a lawyer. And it comes from the very stereotypical, once I got old enough, I love to talk, I love to argue. My parents were like, oh, you'd be a great lawyer. So I was like, okay, I guess that's what I have to do. Very stupid, ignorant reasoning.
I don't think so. That's literally what a lawyer lawyer does. You manipulate your evidence for your case and argue. And
Right, but this was the mind of a 9-10-year-old, so I don't even think it got to that level. It's very superficial is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, for sure. But that's sweet, though. You start with these superficial aspirations and you build something out of it sometimes, if it's what you want to do.
Yeah, so like in my mind, I was like, this is my goal. This is my responsibility to my family. My parents are giving me this opportunity. They're working hard and sacrificing everything that they have to give me this opportunity. So as their child, as their oldest, it's my responsibility to pursue it to the very end. So all throughout grade school, middle school, high school, my goal is always, always, always go to college, go to law school. Where I think you might mention that like I might have changed pace was when I got to high school. At one point, I got interested in doing some of like the vocational training programs that the school offered in high school.
More like technical college type stuff?
Yeah, and it wasn't even any specific technical skill. It was like cooking school, where I was like, oh, it might be interesting to learn how to cook. But my guidance counselor literally told me, she sat me down and she was like, you actually have a chance of going to college. These programs are for people who aren't going to make it to college. So I can't, in good faith, allow you to do this program that'll set you back from the path to college.
Yeah, it's like your Goodwill Hunting.
More or less. She was a very, I don't remember her last name. She was a sweet black lady, guidance counselor. And she was just like, you actually have a shot at going to college, so you should pursue it. So, it got me back on track to like,
important figure looking back, huh?
Yeah, well, very crucial, because otherwise it might be turned out to be an Iron Chef or something. Or maybe working at McDonald's.
yeah. No, definitely. I'm glad that I'm glad that you're not doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things where, you don't really think about much of it at the time. Because if you think about it, I was still a first generation student. When I finally got to senior year, I was top 10% graduating class of my high school. There was 600 graduating students. I don't mean to boast, but of the 60 that were top 10%, I think it was 3 of us that were Latino. So the rest were white and Asian. Even though I think I've told you this several times, the school was majority black and Latino. So and that wasn't even through virtue of like, man, you must have taken like so many AP classes. Like, no, I took one AP and it was AP Spanish. The only other classes I took were just honor classes. It wasn't even that hard. And I always tried convincing my close friends, Latino friends, also first generation, to try to take these honors classes with me. But they were like, no, man, it's too hard. Why am I gonna crack my head over these honors classes that have like extra reading or anything like that?
Dude, me during high school, I was the exact same way. I was just trying to survive in high school. I was so fucking depressed at the time. Like now, since I'm in college, I'm actually like living on my own, running. I feel better. Like now, I feel comfortable. Working hard. That's why I think community and technical colleges are nice. It's like gives you a chance to like low pressure, kind of like ease yourself into college.
They absolutely do, and they are a great opportunity, not only in the academic fields, but also for other vocations as well. But at the time, like I said, I tried convincing my friends because I felt lonely because there wasn't a lot of Latinos in the honors classes.
Your boys weren't there.
They weren't there. We'd hang out during lunch. We'd hang out after school, and then right in class, I'd be like, "Come on, man, take the honors class. I'll help you."
I relate to that so much during the actual shit that I was doing in class. I never had friends because they were all older. In my music stuff, I didn't have that many. Like my friends were always like elsewhere doing something else. I don't know. I relate to that, even though it was for different reasons for me. But
it happens, man. High school is very different. But eventually, what ended up happening when I got to senior year was that. I made a friend, one of the other Latinos that was a top performing in the school. His name was Julio. Julio is a lifesaver because if it wasn't for him, I would have never gotten into college. He was the one who kept reminding me to like apply for the SAT, apply to the PSATs to study for classes. I literally kid you not, I applied for college the day of the deadline for applications. I only applied to 4 schools. And I had Julio on the phone the whole time, and I was asking him questions like, "What the hell's a major?" And Julio's like, "Just pick something. Don't worry about it. You can change it later."
That's
so like, all right.
Just pick something. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, he was like, just pick whatever you liked in school, the college or high school, and then like he's like, you can change it later. I was like, okay, so pick psychology.
And you finished with psychology.
I finished with psychology. I did.
Awesome.
So it serendipitously turned out to be fine.
Yeah.
But
awesome.
I ended up finding years later. I found out that of the 4 colleges, the only reason why it was 4 is because it was a package for the UCs that you could apply to 4 schools at once. So I applied to 4 UCs alone, and then I found out years later that I sent my SAT scores to 4 schools, 2 of which weren't schools I even applied to.
Oh.
Yeah. So of the 4 UCs that I applied to, only 2 got my SAT scores.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So this is, again, first generation trying to navigate this thing, doing everything last minute. I literally wrote my personal statement on the computer. You know how you're supposed to like draft it out on Word and like revise it and then
you don't give a fuck.
I didn't know. I was like, a personal statement? What the fuck? And I was just literally typing it in as the time was crunching down to midnight.
That's great. Oh, I love that. The just, you know, that's great. Yeah, we need more. I love stories of just people being human and just that's so real and just like that struggle. I can relate. I've had so many high pressure moments like that. Like last time you showed up for my last podcast, like I was signing up for classes like when you got here, so I was just like, I don't know. I feel like I never know how to do like business, like bureaucratic stuff. Who does, man? It's been not built for people to be able to like, you know, it's
not intuitively. No.
Yeah, no, it's built to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. That was so painful. It was like I was like literally stressing out because he was like, "You gotta get it in today." Julio on the phone. He had already submitted his. I was like, "Oh fuck, all right." That's why asking him what the hell a major was. But I ended up getting into 2 schools of the 4 that I applied to.
Because you only applied correctly to 2 of them.
Yeah, I only applied correctly to them, and then I accepted Davis without ever visiting it.
Nice.
And the reason why I accepted Davis over Santa Barbara was because I had heard through the grapevine that 1 in 10 people have an STD in Santa Barbara, and that was my deciding reason.
That's funny. Santa Barbara is that's funny. That's such a funny choice you had because it was totally a choice between party school and prestigious university.
I don't know if Davis was that prestigious back in 2008, man.
UC Davis is totally. I think it's been a prestigious university for a while. It's one of the big dogs. It's one of the most prestigious.
Well, back in the day, I don't think it had as big of a reputation. I think I could be wrong, but I do remember once I got into Davis, a lot of the Asian kids that were in my honors classes were like, "How did you get into Davis?" And I always hated when people like are demeaning or like mean like that.
I mean, that's just a straight up racist, like or like a dick.
Whatever the intent behind it, I hate when people try to put other people down, and my initial response is always to be a dick back. So when people would ask, it happened a couple times, "How did you get into Davis?" I'd be like, "I guess I'm just smarter than you."
Yeah, that's fair, man. If you're gonna be a dick, then you absolutely invite the to respond in kind.
Yeah.
But all right, we did an hour and a half. We'll do it again.
We could try for another day.
Oh.
Maybe a little bit more time in between.
Oh man, yeah. There's plenty more to go, and we'll give it a month at least. Yeah. All right. This has been Angel Castro. Later. Oh, you want to plug anything?
Well, check us out when we go to open mics throughout the week. We've been going to the places in Sacramento. There's the On the Y. There's Vince's. We just went to a scoreboard today, and then what was the other one? The Arts Palace. Yeah, and you could find us on social media. I'm on. I don't really use Twitter, but I'm on that too. You can just find me as Angel Castro _comedy on Instagram or on Facebook, Angel Castro. Yeah, check us out and send me a message.
So people know where to find me if they're listening to this.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. All right.